Well, all right. Things are working. Hello. How are you? Thank you so much for joining me. My name is Jason Levine, and it's great to have you here with me today for episode 6, the final episode of this How to Make Great Video series, episode 6. Sharing your work, destination publishing, and even ways to monetize that B-roll and other things that you've got sitting around that, maybe you shot a bunch of beauty stuff and you just don't know what to do with it, or maybe you never thought about doing anything with it. We're going to talk a bit about that as well. So let's go ahead and switch over and get right to it. All right, here we are. I'm going to quickly as well just reset my workspace here to the saved layout. All right, looks groovy. Terrific. Okay, so now that we've gotten this far and we've talked about all the different ways to sort of stylize and edit and do cool things to your video, naturally, of course, how do we get it out of here? How do we share it? How do we export? How do we encode these videos? And what are some unique ways that you can actually upload directly to your favorite social location? First, of course, by selecting the sequence that you want to actually export. And then let's go into File, Export Media. Now, of course, you also have keyboard shortcuts for all of this. So in this case, Command-M or Control-M will get you into the export dialog. Okay, it'll pull up the media encoder. And we're going to be presented with lots of options. Now, this is what gets kind of, daunting and a bit scary to some, especially if you don't work with this stuff all the time, is that what format am I using? So let's talk about that for just a minute. Now, I know many of you who do this all the time, this is not going to be new. For those of you kind of new to video, getting started to video, and more importantly, getting started with publishing your content to Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Snapchat, wherever, what format? Because when you go into the format dropdown in here, let me go ahead and center this. I'll make this nice and big. You also don't need to see all these apps. Let's hide that. When we go under format, we've got lots of formats here, right? We have some audio-only formats, AS1011. These are sort of related to broadcast. You've got DNX HD, DNX HR. Many of you will know these from the Avid world. These are professional formats, often used as intermediate. Proxy codecs and sometimes delivery codecs. DPX, cinema format. H.264, which is common for web and social. So this is really the one that we're going to focus on today. Also worth pointing out, because I still see questions about this, H.265. Now this is the next sort of generation, the next evolution of H.264. Higher quality, smaller file size. Anyone who watched the WWDC last week, was it earlier this week? Earlier this week, they talked about the new Macs having sort of native capabilities for encode decode of H.265. So this is big news. And again, this is kind of the next evolution of that. And then you've got all these various image formats, image sequence formats, and additional MPEG formats, Ping, P2 Movie, QuickTime, Target TIFF, Waveform, Raptor. It can get very, very confusing and very, very daunting. So the one that you're going to focus on for social publishing is H.264. Now, what's nice about this is that, again, we give you lots and lots of presets to kind of get you there and to get started. Now, we're really going to cover a lot of what's happening inside of this panel, outside of just the presets, because there's a lot of cool things that you can do, which many people never even stumble upon, all right? First, let's just talk about presets. So one of the default things when you choose H.264 is that you'll see it'll do a match source. Now, what's significant about match source is that it's literally going to take all of the attributes of whatever it is that you're cutting. So if you're doing 1920 1080 standard HD, or you're doing 720p 1280 by 720 HD, or maybe you're working in Square because you're planning on doing Square video export to Instagram. They also support widescreen, so you might be working like that. Or perhaps you're doing vertical, going to Snapchat. It will take whatever the attributes are of the original content that you're working in, and it will create an H.264 version of that with all of those same attributes. The attributes are frame size, so in this case, 1920 1080, frame rate, 23976 for this, could be 24, could be 25, could be 2997. Most of your social networks out there, the max frame rate is 30. Aspect ratio, progressive scan or interlaced, it's going to take whatever it is, and it's going to pass all that through and create this H.264 version of that. So you might think, okay, well, that's useful for everything, right? Well, yes, except that specifically with social networks, there are some things some sort of best practices that you want to follow. So here's where our preset menu, and actually for H.264, probably the best one, is that we have dozens and dozens of presets here for various destinations. And you'll see it'll include even different devices that you might not even think about all the time, like the Amazon Kindle Fire. These are kind of standard Android phone and tablet presets. Okay, we can kind of scroll through these. Here you can see you've got Apple TV, iPad, iPhone. There's so many. And we constantly update these. iPad 2, right? Different resolution requirements. Dozens and dozens of those. The B&N Nook. Anybody who's rocking the Nook from Barnes & Noble, you've got presets for that. The first one we stumble upon here, though, oops, let me just scroll up a little more so you can see that, is Facebook, okay? Now, Facebook in particular is kind of unique and important to point out because despite being in a now Ultra HD 4K world, what Facebook wants, what they want you to upload is a 720p video, 1280 by 720. Now, you can also do square on there as well, but in terms of most of what I'm shooting here, which is all widescreen, it wants 720p. So simply by choosing, whoops, I chose the wrong one. Simply by choosing that preset, give it a second to choose it. Sorry, I got a little flick crazy with my magic mouse here. Let's go to Facebook. It's going to pull up exactly what you need, exactly what they're requesting for your upload, okay? And if we take a look here under the video tab here for your basic video settings, it's going to show you. So in this case, it's going to take my, and by the way, you can also see this in the summary up at the top here. So here's the source, 1920 1080, square pixels, frame rate, progressive, duration, 48K audio stereo. Our Facebook preset makes it 720p, square pixels, retains the frame rate, progressive, VBR, single pass, and here's your bit rates for all of that. Here's your audio, AAC, 192 kilobits at 44.1 in stereo, okay? So this is a great way if you're just wanting to cut something together, make a video that's uploadable and upload ready for Facebook. This is a great choice. This is a great option, okay? And similarly, if we continue to scroll down here, again, you'll see some presets for TiVo, Twitter as well. So here's, I think we just added this one in one of the most recent Premiere Pro AME updates. Hello, Amir. Hello, Steele. Yes, now you can upload them in UHD. So Steele brings up a good question. You can upload these. The upload requirements will allow you to, sure, they can be bigger. They can be 3840 by 2160. They're not being displayed that way. And they're also getting re-encoded and crunched down even further. So there is a school of thought that, in particular with things like Instagram, the display is 600 by 600, or depending, well, that would be square. It's 600 pixels wide. So you can upload up to 1080 pixels wide. So why not do that? Because ultimately they're going to recompress, re-encode, squash it down even further. So yes, you can upload larger, and that's a good thing. It's still being displayed in the case of Facebook at 720, in the case of Twitter, 720 wide in this case as well. Now, YouTube is really the only exception where, of course, you can do true 4K uploads here, but and Vimeo as well. But so that's really entirely up to you, and you can play around with it and see, you know, sort of what works better for you, how technical you want to get with this. You know, are most people going to care? Where is it being viewed? Remember again that most of the time we're looking at it on this. So whether you uploaded a 4K master, which is being delivered at 720p, or a high bitrate 720p, which is then re-encoded and then shown at 720p, it's kind of going to look the same. I mean, you know, yes, there may be some variances. There may be a little bit of noise. There may be a little bit of pixelation, whatever the word is. You're looking at it on your phone, you know. I'm someone who used to stress over this stuff all the time. What happens? Nobody cares. This is the essence of social publishing. Get your message out there. Get the video out there. Get it out there quickly. Be timely. Make it look good. The quality has to be good. That's really in the edit, right? That's in the color grading. That's in the styling. That's making sure the sound is good. That's making sure you have your captions. But once we deploy, if we're consuming on this, you know, Ultra HD, 4K, 8K, 20K, doesn't matter as far as we go, it's not going to matter. It's really not. It may matter to some. It used to matter a whole lot to me. But it's about getting the message out there. So again, you can. It's entirely up to you. And you can find all different kind of vlogs and blogs about their specs and what they require. And you'll get right to it. Okay. So back over to YouTube and Vimeo here. So again, we've got 720. Oh, you can't see that. It's all the way at the bottom. I can't even zoom down any further. 720p is just below this 480p SD. Here's your 4K. Here's your HD. And then we've got some. We don't actually have the 4K preset in Vimeo here just yet. If you want to do .mov, you can choose QuickTime. Now, again, you've got different considerations when you're working on the Mac versus working in the PC world, on the Windows world, although you can do QuickTime exports and such. We've got some presets in here for you to get started. What makes it easy, particularly if you're on the Mac, works the same way, though, with the PC. If you're in the Video tab here under Video Codec, here's where you will find all of the available various QuickTime formats, you know, for export. So here's all of your ProRes flavors. Again, now this is the QuickTime wrapped Avid formats, which is not really the desired one. That's why we have native DNX. Similarly, here's like the, again, QuickTime wrapped DNX HR, DNX HD. Here's the QuickTime flavor of H.264 in a .move container, okay? JPEG 2000, motion JPEG, etc. It all functions the same, okay? So different formats will also offer, that's actually a great segue though, they'll offer, you know, different variations in video codec choice. This starts to get very specific, but beyond that, there's no difference in terms of the general export. Okay, let's go back to H.264 for a moment here. So that's presets. Now you've seen presets. Woo! Now we know where these things are. Okay. Now, when we get beyond this, comments, output name, oh, and by the way, just to kind of show you, this is silly, but it's not silly because you need to know. When you export your video, where do they go? Well, by default, you'll see here, like it's going to take the last location that you exported to. So in this case, it's going to my, when I hover over my little tooltip here. Where's my tooltip? Tooltip, there it is. Come back. Thank you. It's going to my desktop, okay? So if you want to change the output location and the name, just click on that text and tell it where you want to go, okay? That's simple. Give it a new name and change the location. I know that seems silly, seems stupid. Why even point it out? No, I've had so many people go, yeah, I exported. I don't know where it went. Because maybe they were with, you know, using external drives and they had done proxies or done something else and everything was going to an external drive. That's how you change that. Very important. Also, this is where you can determine if you want to export video and audio, one or the other, or both together. Simple checkboxes. You can also just kind of twirl up this summary if you don't like having that there. So, someone just asked, how do I do like an image overlay or a watermark for my video? Or what if I wanted to add timecode to my video, right? Let's say you're doing selects or sort of rushes of a shoot for the day. Or what if I just want to have some kind of additional text or overlay or watermark or something? How do I do that? Or what if I wanted to, say, adjust the overall length? What? The overall length of my whole video. It's 30 seconds. It needs to be 29 seconds and 10 frames. I don't have time to edit out 20 frames. Can I actually do that? Can I shrink it down before I export? Yes, you can. I'm going to show you that. What if I want to make all of the audio in my export broadcast safe? I want to loudness normalize so that when I deliver it to Netflix or NBC or whomever, any network around the world, it's broadcast legal. Can I do that on export? And the answer is yes. Where do I find all of these magical things? You find them inside the Effects tab here. And I'm going to go through a couple of these that are sort of most applicable to most situations. There's a lot of things in here that are kind of very broadcast oriented, and most of you will never use them, so I'm not going to cover those here. You can find more about that in CC Learn and with a lot of our various training videos. Okay, so the first thing that you can do is under Effects here, you'll notice that you have the option to actually add Lumetri looks or LUTs. Now you'll remember when we were talking about color correction, this will allow you to, apply any and all of the Lumetri presets that we give you, including the ability to select your own custom LUT. This is awesome. Now, a couple of reasons why you might do this on an export. You might do this, again, if you're shooting sort of your raw footage of the day. You've got a bunch of your selects that you want your director, your actors, whomever to see. A lot of times, you don't want them to see the sort of flat, washed out looking video. You can apply a specific LUT on export, and all that content will just look, it'll be sort of pre-color graded, okay? So you can apply looks and LUTs here directly. And there's a lot of reasons why you do this. Think of it, if I just lost you there and you're going, I don't know what he's talking about. Let's say you just have your video, you didn't do any color correction, and as you export, you're like, oh, I want to apply a filter. Well, think of this as a way to do that. I wouldn't use that language necessarily, but you can, okay? And this allows you to apply, and you'll see that as I apply, so this is blue called, that actually looks pretty neat. As you choose these, you're going to get a preview of what they look like. And by the way, if I use I'm using my gesture on my Magic Mouse here. That one looks very good, actually, Gold Rush. You can preview and sort of scroll through these to see what these looks will actually look like when applied to your footage before exporting it, okay? So that's really useful. Very, very useful. This matrix blue, I happen to like a lot of these sort of blue tinted ones. Very cool. So this is just a way to, again, apply a look to everything, to your whole edit on export. You could have done it in the timeline in Premiere Pro as well. This is just one more way to do that, okay? Applying looks and LUTs on the export. Image overlay. What is this? Watermarking. Now this can be used in two ways. One, you put your content out there and you want your particular watermark branded logo on everything that you put up on Instagram, on Facebook, whatever it is. Or it's kind of your call to action that's always sitting in the bottom left or bottom right. This is how you can do that. And by the way, and I'll show you this kind of in a few minutes, anything that you select inside this effects tab, these elements can be saved as part of the preset you choose. So yeah, so you're creating branded content for Facebook, branded content for Instagram, branded content for Twitter. You can make the preset, you can add your image overlay, you can add your look, you can add your text, you can add additional things. These can all be saved with the preset. So when you do your edit tomorrow, you choose the preset there, you don't have to set this stuff ever again. Very, very useful. So, image overlay. Let's say I want to add my Jace's Places branded logo to all the content that I export, okay? Choose image overlay. What do we want to do? Well, you're going to choose an overlay image. So if you want to overlay, I typically create these as PNG files right out of Photoshop. You can just export. You can even do the quick export as PNG with transparency. Let's go ahead and choose it. So I have one on the desktop here. This is something that I showed in one of the earlier parts of this series. So here's my little Jace's Places logo. And you'll notice that I created it with the logo right in the center. You'll see why. So I didn't format it to be a lower third when I built the image overlay, because when you import this, you'll see that you have positioning options, okay? Now, it doesn't mean that you could have made it so that it was down here and then you don't have to adjust anything. But the point is, you have positioning options here. Top right, top left, bottom right, okay? And then you can further offset and override the position. So if I wanted it to be like this, you can see I'm just kind of scrubbing through the values here, all right? So I'm going to offset this like that. You have size, so we can readjust the size after the fact, which is very, very handy. Maybe when you were exporting it out of Photoshop, you thought it looked right. Now you kind of see it in the context of the export and you think, it's a little small. You can resize after the fact. And this is also very cool, opacity. So if you want the content, you see this a lot now when people kind of do a branded logo overlay, image overlay. Most of the time now, it's not 100% opaque. There's usually some of the screen bleeding through, some of the content underneath bleeding through. You can adjust that right here, and you can have it very, very subtle. All right. So it's just kind of always there, but again, it doesn't get in the way of the content. So just to kind of showcase this to you very quickly, let's just do a really fast, just do like a few seconds of an export here. Test export. All right, I'm going to do this right now with the image overlay. Choose export. Now, hold on, can you see this in here? Yeah. Let me talk about this real briefly since I'm here. So many of you will have noticed that there's two buttons inside of Media Encoder when you're finishing or exporting your video. One is Q, the other is export. What is the difference and why would you use them? So Q, sort of the preferred method for most of the things that I do, and I would probably say for most people, that's what I would recommend. Queuing allows you to send the video non-destructively in the background to the Adobe Media Encoder, right? Which is a separate application in the background, which means a couple of things. One, you're going to be able to render this in the background, and whether you continue to work in Premiere or you're going to go do mail or go on the web or do something else, queuing allows you to do that. This also allows you to queue multiple things, right? Multiple projects. So they can wait in the queue, and then you can choose to run the queue whenever. Sometimes I might open up 10 different projects, queue a sequence, queue a timeline, but I don't export it till I kind of get everything in the queue. So this is a very ideal, logical way. Additionally, on a more tech nerdy side, queuing also allows you to choose if you are leveraging any kind of GPU acceleration and the software renderer that you and the renderer that you want to use for GPU. So whether you use our native software renderer, OpenCL, Apple Metal, or if you have a supported NVIDIA card that uses CUDA, you can also go through the CUDA GPU to render your content, okay? That's using queuing. Queuing is very effective, very cool. You can also do watch folders and things like that when you use the queue. Now, export is a little different because what export does is it is not meant for background. In fact, export is kind of what we refer to as, that's kind of a modal export, meaning that if you export, you're going to be stuck in this window right here. And it's going to use all of the resources in your system, all of the RAM, all of everything to do a very fast export. Okay, you're kind of throwing all the power of your machine at this export. This is good for doing kind of quick tests. It's going to be faster, most likely, than going through the queue. Now, two fundamental differences here. One, when you export, using this export option, it's not that you're locked out of everything else, but if you try and even go to mail or do something, just do email, this is sucking all of the resources. So things are going to be very, very slow by design because you're throwing all of the resources to Premiere, okay? The other option is that you don't have a choice of renderer, of GPU renderer. So it's going to use the software renderer when you're in export, when you use this export option, okay? Let's go ahead and just do that now very quickly. I'll choose export. You'll see it's going to encode my sequence. Here we go. Again, it throws all the resources at that, and I've got all kinds of color correction and overlays and those 2K scratch overlays on top of that. All right, and it's done. Real quickly, let's just go to the desktop here. And here's the test export that I just made. And there it is with my JP logo on there. All right, so that's what we just did, right? We just did this right now. Okay, image overlay, branding overlay, simple, easy. Now, something else to keep in mind when we talked in the very beginning about organizing and I talked about ingest presets. This is where if you want to have an overlay for creating proxies, you actually create the preset with the overlay in Premiere's export media encoder that I just showed you moments ago. And then you can export this through the actual media encoder app as an ingest preset. This is where you do that image overlay addition. All right. Up in Premiere, and this, by the way, you'll find the same dialog that I'm going to show you now in After Effects and Audition and Photoshop and Premiere and Character Animator. Let's go into Preferences, Memory. On the PC, it'll be Edit Preferences, Memory. So here is where you determine what's being used in the foreground and in the background based on your system spec. So for me, I've got 16 gigs of RAM. So when I'm in an active application, and you can see right now I'm highlighted in Premiere because I'm in Premiere, I'm allocating 11 gigs to Premiere and 5 for everything else. Now notice Media Encoder is in here as well. So it's the same concept. Media Encoder, based on what you said here. Now, yes, could you, in theory, allocate everything. I mean, you have to leave some, but allocate as much as you can to Media Encoder. Yes, but that's not what it's doing by default. That's not by design for the sole purpose of being able to queue and then do other things. You know, I'm a classic case of I let it encode, and then that's when I go back to email, go to Twitter, go to, start doing my social stuff while it's encoding video, because it's not going to get in the way. So this is where you set that. That's the difference between queuing and exporting. All right. So let's go back to export again. What is using maximum render quality about? This box here is the one he's referring to. And if you highlight over this, if you hover over this, there's a tooltip, I believe, which tells you that it's going to give you better quality scaling, but increases the encode time. So really, maximum render quality, where this becomes useful, in particular, is if you are scaling down, or up, I guess, in some cases. But rescaling your content, you'll want that box checked. Otherwise, I don't generally check that box. If you want to personally go ahead and do the side-by-side, so in other words, if you've got a 4K video and you're exporting to whether it's H.264 or whatever, you're not rescaling it, try and export with maximum render quality checked and with one unchecked. Personally, my eye, I don't see much or any real difference at all. Now, if I'm going from 4K to 1080, I want that box checked because it's going to give you a better looking downscaled version. It's going to take longer to render, okay? So you'll want that. And we'll cover some more of these later, but that should answer your question now. Okay, so we talked about adding looks and LUTs. We talked about adding the image overlay, and I'll just continue. I'll add all of these things as we're going, okay? All right. Name overlay, again, here's where you can add just the name of the source files. And you can see output file names. This is, just additional stuff that it's pulling from the file itself. Test grade, close-up stylus, okay? You can add a prefix, brushes 1, something like that, whatever. It'll add that prefix. So this could be my daily rushes. So I'm looking at all this content. This is stuff that you see, again, sort of in production. You can have a suffix. Again, you've got your positioning, your offset, your size, and your opacity. Pretty self-explanatory. Timecode overlays. Now, this is something which I think is very useful, particularly, if you're, again, reviewing footage, reviewing content for selection purposes. A lot of times, if I'm shooting something I do a lot of sort of pro bono work, and the client wants to see different takes, different various takes of various shots that we did. A lot of times I'll say, okay, I'm going to export all these with timecode. Okay, and you can see it just drops the timecode right on there of the clip. So, as you're watching, take note and let me know that, and this is where having specific text or something helps, because they can say, oh, okay, yeah, in shot 2, I like having the, at 27 seconds, 10 frames, I like that bit, etc. Sometimes you just want the timecode on there for reference. It's entirely up to you. You can see that the timecode source here from the media file, or it'll just generate it automatically. And again, you can choose your format and your start time, okay? Very easy. The size, the opacity, the location, and the position, all right? So this is where you do your timecode overlays. Very, very cool, very, very useful. Now, these last 3 things, you will seldom find information on these anywhere. So when I recreate these videos for YouTube, rest assured, I'm going to spend a lot of time making sure that the chapters are specific to these 3 right here, because these are things that almost never get discovered and they're extremely useful. Time tuner. So this is exactly what I was talking about before. What if you're cutting a spot, cutting something for Instagram where it has to be 60 seconds. And when you go to export here and you look in Premiere, it's showing you, it's 60 seconds and 15 frames. Well, regardless of what social network you're going to, they have, those that have fixed duration limits, they're going to cut it off for you. You don't want that to happen. So what can you do? Well, if you're in a pinch and you want to be, and you can afford to adjust your duration up or down up to 10%, I don't recommend using the full 10. You can use something in our media encoder here called the time tuner. Now, this is really one of those magical Adobe features. And what this does is it analyzes your video and looks for moments of minimal visual movement. So perhaps you have a shot where, the camera is steady and there's nothing really happening. It will actually cut out those static frames for you, okay, to adjust the duration. It'll actually modify the time here. So you have an option to adjust the duration plus or minus 10%. I think you'll find that in most cases, 5 to 6% works really, really well. Beyond that, things can get a little weird, but not always. You just have to try it. Where this is really effective is in the case of something like this, where it's like, oh, it needs to be, exactly 30, or it needs to be 29 seconds and, 23 frames. That's a duration change of minus 5.27%. That's going to be pretty awesome. Okay. Now, you'll see here you've got duration change and target duration. And it's got little tooltips to tell you how the time tumor effect is saved in presets. Choose target duration to adjust all outputs to a specific target, or choose duration change to adjust each as a percentage, right? Because as I mentioned, this effect can get saved as part of your preset. So if you know that everything you're going to export, going to, let's say these are all of your Facebook video or Instagram videos, they all have to be 60 seconds, you would choose a target duration. Everything needs to be this target. So regardless of what it is, and it'll adjust the percentage based on that target, okay? So really, really cool and effective that you have those different options there. Okay, so that's the time tuner. Video limiter. Now again, this one specifically is more sort of broadcast friendly here. Not too many of you will ever need this. I just showcased this because, again, this just kind of brings things within broadcast video limits, broadcast friendly specs. A lot of people don't know that we even have this here. This is where this can be applied. But the coolest one, and I think this can be used for everybody, and this is kind of a good way to continue the concept of loudness standardization across all of our various video consumption platforms, is loudness normalization. Now, if you're unfamiliar with what that is, this is kind of it's this concept that today, whether we're watching TV or broadcast TV or networks like Netflix or Amazon or Hulu or something on the web, the way that people mix their sound is really still very much all over the place. Similarly, you'll be watching sporting events. Sometimes it's crazy loud. It goes to the commercial, and the commercial is even 10 times louder. Or, you're watching something on the web and his video is really quiet and you go to her video and it's super loud. There's no there are standards, but there's no absolute standard way that things have to be deployed just yet. Now, with broadcast networks, that is changing and has been changing over the last couple of years. What loudness normalization does is it analyzes and looks at the overall loudness. We're not talking peak amplitude, right? There's always going to be variances in individual peaks. A peak is something like if I'm talking like this, and then suddenly I get very excitable and it gets louder for a moment there. That's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is that average overall loudness. And having an average overall loudness is what keeps your viewers not only entertained, but engaged, and it keeps them watching and listening. If you've got too many variances in your volume or your loudness, it's kind of a known thing today that people, they turn off. What this also allows you to do is to conform to specific broadcast standards, even if you're not a broadcaster. So here in the US, typically we're going to follow the ITU BS 1770-3 standard for loudness, with a target loudness of minus 24 LUFS. Now, I realize this is getting sort of technical here. I've also got a video about loudness normalization on my YouTube channel. We have lots of different training videos on CC Learn about this. We also have these options, of course, on the Audition side as well. It's just this idea that you're kind of standardizing the loudness. And I invite you to check this out if you've never tried this before. And again, it's just going to unify the loudness of all of your content. Now, if you're going to a target of -24, but you're not going to broadcast TV, that actually may be a little quiet for things like YouTube, all right? So again, you can increase this, though, manually. So for YouTube, to be honest, having analyzed a lot of the videos up there, -8 to -12 is a range that I've personally seen. And if you're talking about making just audio, you know, that loudness it's even higher, okay? -16 LUFS is kind of a standard these days for podcasting, if that tells you anything. So if you're creating podcasts or sort of vlog-style video podcasts, -16 LUFS, kind of a standard in loudness there. But this is just something that you can do on the export. Now, keep in mind, if you've got a good audio mixer, and if they're doing a lot of advanced actual mixing and mastering of your content, and if you're going to YouTube or a social network, you don't really have to touch this. This is really, today, this is more specific to our broadcast customers. But I want to point this out because it can be used, and it can be used as a, I don't want to say as a final mastering step. I mean, I'm an audio engineer, so other audio engineers in the chat, don't get angry. This is not mastering. It's just a way to, again, sort of unify the loudness, the way that you hear things in a very consistent kind of way. This is something you can apply at the export, okay? And this is where you're going to find it. And what's nice is this can also be saved as part of your preset. So let's talk about that. How do we save that as part of the preset? Well, up here in export settings, you'll see that you have this little icon here to save the preset. And that's where you can actually do that, okay? So here, oh, whoops, hold on, sorry about that. Close myself there. Here, if we go ahead and choose Save Preset, you'll notice that it asks you first to give it a name, and then you can save your effects settings, okay? So anything that, all those checkboxes that we just went through can be saved as part of the preset you're creating. This is absolute gold because once I get it right, once I have it exactly as I want, I don't want to have to do this again. So you can save those effects settings. It will also save your publish settings. So here's where this gets very cool. Let's go back out here and let's go into the Publish tab. And here is where you have the ability to not only export, but simultaneously, again, now this is also very useful. This is also particularly useful when you queue. Sorry, I think I just hit the mic there. This is also particularly useful when you queue your exports because you can have it exporting your MP4s in the background, and then it can publish to the associated social network also in the background, meaning that it's uploading without you having to go to the browser, okay, or back through your phone or whatever. Where do we currently allow you to publish to today? Obviously, you can publish and upload to Creative Cloud, Adobe Stock, which we're going to talk about in just a moment here, Behance, Facebook, FTP, Twitter, Vimeo, and YouTube. So YouTube, Vimeo, Twitter, and Facebook, and Behance, all of those social networks you can deploy directly from here. You don't have to go back through some other way to get it there. How do you do that? Well, it's as simple as logging into your account. So here I have my YouTube account. You can see I've already logged in. Okay. And if I simply choose the checkbox here, all right, I log into my account. I can set my privacy. And again, your options will vary based on the platform you're uploading to. You can also set tags. You can also set a description, and you just queue it and you're done. You're good to go. It's that simple. All right. Again, if we were to go to something like Twitter here, all right, now I'm not logged in. So when you choose log in, it'll pull up a web dialog, probably one of those authentication dialogues. You'll authenticate, you'll allow Premiere's Media Encoder to connect to Twitter, and it will remember you now in perpetuity, okay, whether this box is checked or not. Same with Facebook, okay? So you twirl down, you log in. Notice again your privacy level, private, public, all friends, friends of friends, etc. Your descriptions, certain things, again, the options will differ based on the platform you're going to. And all of this gets saved as part of that export, that part of that preset, if you want it to have it that way. So destination publishing. Why do it this way? Why not just go to YouTube? Because ultimately, YouTube, of course, in particular, has all these other options. You've got all your monetization options. You've got, all of the different categorization options, additional options for captioning and such. This is just a good, quick way, though, to get that content up there. And typically, if I'm publishing a bunch of things to YouTube, even like these videos, I'll publish them unlisted and then go back and finesse things later. But if I queue it, this is great because then it can be exporting in the background, it can be uploading in the background, and I can be out and about, I can be eating, I can be doing something else, and it's working for me, right? So Effects tab, Publishing tab, Video tab, Audio tab. Now here in particular, you have lots of different options. Now again, we're talking about H.264 for our social networks. Most of them prefer AAC audio. That's going to be the default. Look at all the various presets. You're going to see they will have audio format as AAC. Just read a very interesting article the other day shared by one of our users here where they were saying that MP3 Thomson Fraunhofer is now, MP3 it's no more. It's going away. After all these years, the new standard will be AAC. So again, AAC is our friend here. Choose that format. Now you've got lots of different flavors of AAC. AAC Plus, which again, this was introduced in iTunes probably more than a decade ago. Your various sample rates. Now, I just want to talk about Instagram for a second. And actually, I've got an Instagram created preset here, specifically calling out Instagram because this is another one where, I've got a preset for 600 pixels square. That is ultimately what your video is displayed at, 600 pixels wide. So whether you're doing 600 by 356 or whatever the equivalent is of a 1920 1080 scaled down to 600 pixels wide, again, how you're seeing it on there is 600 pixels. So do you want to export a 600 pixel wide video to Instagram? Yes, no, it's going to get recompressed. So, and we all know that they do a lot of compression there. So you have to play around with it. I've had this preset a long time. Here's a 1080 version of it. Again, knowing that they're ultimately going to rescale this for me. But what I wanted to point out was the audio sample rate. And I've seen a lot of conflicting info about this, and I don't know. I don't know exactly what they require. Most of our videos, are going to leverage 48K. The default for video creation is 48K, and I think everyone can accept 48. The question is, what do they really require? Well, doing a new perusal of specs today before this stream, I found several blogs that said that Instagram actually wants 44.1. Now, for those of you who are not audio nerds, what is 44,100 hertz versus 48,000 or 48K? Best descriptor of that is 48K is kind of the video standard. 44.1 has been since the dawn of CDs. That's the audio standard. All the files, if you still download MP3s, from iTunes or Amazon, those are 44.1 kilohertz. All the content that you shoot on your DSLRs typically today that goes into, or, in a standard recorder for video, they work at 48K. Different flavors. Ultimately, most of these networks can handle both. But for Instagram specifically, I saw that, again, on some blogs, some said 48, most of them said 44.1, which makes sense because that's that's sort of the music standard. The stuff that you're listening to on Spotify or Apple Music or Google Play, it's 44.1, okay? Channels. Now, again, stereo, that's kind of the standard today. We expect that. I saw several blogs that said a lot of these networks want mono. Now, you might think, mono? Why? Well, again, stereo on a mobile device, it doesn't really matter. It's not, maybe in headphones a bit, but I will tell you why mono is important because it ensures backwards compatibility on any system. A lot of times, particularly when they re-encode, that stereo gets a bit murky. Things can happen to it. So always checking to make sure that it sounds good in mono is not a bad idea. And remember, consider where it's going. If you're uploading to YouTube, yes, stereo, absolutely. Uploading to Vimeo, stereo, absolutely. Facebook or Instagram, while you're watching it in the palm of your hand, stereo doesn't matter. It doesn't. Your brain is not going to interpret the spatial positioning left and right on those two little teeny speakers, even on a 7 Plus, very little. So that's up to you. Again, I've seen both in terms of the recommended spec. I'm not entirely sure. So audio quality, again, low, medium, high. Obviously, this is pretty self-explanatory. A lot of people say low, keep the files smaller, I'll typically say high just because you're already compressing it. It's already getting encoded to something else. You want your audio to be as high quality as possible. and then bitrate. Now, this, again, I've seen differing opinions on what the actual standard is, and I really don't know. I've seen too many things. I've seen some that look like official blogs from some of these places, and they're not. So the default for most of these is going to be 320 kilobits, which is the highest that you can go here in AAC. By default, though, if you're going to do anything, at a minimum, 128 stereo or mono. I wouldn't, stereo for sure. I wouldn't go any lower than this. Do not go lower than 128. And unless your content is going to get bounced back, you typically want to go as high as possible. The audio portion of your export is so much smaller than the video itself. In other words, in terms of the encoding, that really you're not buying yourself too much space or room. Now, a lot of these networks, of course, have file size limitations. That's more on the video side, not so much on the audio side. You're going to save a little in audio and the bit rate chosen. It's a lot different when you modify the video bit rate. Okay, so just to kind of point that out, again, most things are going to be 320. That's recommended. And if you're just doing your own exports for YouTube, you absolutely want this as high as possible in stereo. And YouTube, of course, will do 48K beautifully. So no worries there. Advanced settings, precedence, bit rate over sample rate. I think the default is bit rate. You can just leave that there. Okay. Now let's see. Captions, of course. Now this is if you've got captions applied. Again, a lot of these networks have caption limitations, so you can find those on their respective sites to kind of show you some of the limitations there. But this is where those things can be applied and your export options for those. But let's now talk about publishing to Adobe Stock. And this was one of the things that we had in the description there about kind of leveraging that B-roll. What do you do if you want to monetize content that you otherwise would not have used or wouldn't have done anything with? Okay. So let's say I've got all this footage of the tone arm here. And, I do a lot of stock. Lately, I've been shooting a lot of video and photography for Adobe Stock. Why? Many of you have been thinking, I'll never do stock. I don't care. Well, here's the thing. People use stock video. Stock video is huge. It's bigger than ever. It's one of these industries that's been around a long time. Stock photography, everybody knows. Stock video is growing. It's growing massively. And the reason is because it's not just for, big time commercials. It's not just for small time. It's for anything now. You're cutting a spot, you're cutting one of your own personal pieces for YouTube, for Facebook, whatever. You just need a shot of people laughing in a bar, but you don't have time to take your DSLR down to the local bar and shoot a bunch of people and then get licenses, model releases to use that content. Stock is a great way to do that. And of course, Adobe Stock is directly integrated into Premiere Pro, into Photoshop, into Illustrator, into After Effects. So you can not only search and find content, but you can also become a stock contributor. And what that means is that you can take content that you've shot that might otherwise not be monetized in any way, and you can sell it on Adobe Stock. It has to be accepted. They have to accept your content. But it's a fantastic way to, again, add another income stream to the stuff that you're already doing. So here I've got all these beautiful shots of like turntables and and you might think, who wants this? So listen, someone might be making a documentary on, the 60s and listening to music or whatever, and they need a shot, or maybe I can't tell you how many times I had to reshoot this to get like the focus right, not to be confused with Focusrite, the audio interface, but to get a really sharp focus on the needle here, like because I was doing a sort of a slight rack. So you notice here at the beginning, I'm sort of now this was kind of I'm racked right around here. And I had to readjust focus, right, so that I could refocus in on the position of the needle. Took me a while to get that shot, and if I had found one on stock, I would have just bought it, all right? I would have just licensed it, because this is what I needed. Well, this is what I'm talking about. So let's say I want to actually attempt selling this piece on Adobe Stock. Well, let's go ahead and do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my work area here. Now, Adobe Stock, like your social networks, it has some requirements. First and foremost, your clip has to be a minimum of 6 seconds. So let's go ahead and wind this back. We'll start it right as it's moving in. All right. This is an older auto turntable that I have. And I like this. I like it how it is. So let's go up here and choose Export Media. And when I go into the media encoder here, I want to make sure that it's going to export the work area, all right? Because I just want this clip. As I said, we're doing this clip by clip, okay? So you can see, if I just shrink this up here, source range, work area, or you could say entire sequence, or sequence in to out, or a custom range, okay? We want the work area, and that work area is approximately, 10 seconds, okay? I don't want this logo either because, again, I'm wanting to use this. I want people to be able to download this and use this for anything. So I don't want my watermark on there. Let's take that image overlay off. Okay. So I'm going to take this content as it is. We can preview it here. And let's give it a name. We'll call this Tone Arm Back to Start. All right, that's just the name of it. I'm going to save it to my desktop. Okay. How am I exporting this? Well, again, this is 1080 source footage. Typically, for my 1080p source footage, I actually use the YouTube preset. I use the YouTube preset because that leverages target bit rates of 16 megabits, which for HD is great. You could actually really go to about 8. Frankly, I think 16, it just looks better. The content natively was 24 megabits, so this is good, okay? This is what you're gonna want. It's H.264, okay? Now, if this were 4K and it was done in ProRes or something like that, you can also export ProRes media, high quality ProRes media, to Adobe Stock as well. All right, so if you're working 4K, I don't want to upload H.264, I would want a ProRes master, you can do that, all right? So in this case, I'm going to go over to my Publish tab here. I'm going to click on Adobe Stock, and hopefully I'm logged in. All right, I'm not logged in. All right, so hold on. So let's go to the Login dialog here. And now you can see it shows me as logged in, okay? Now, there's no options here for setting anything, all right? And there's a reason for that. You're going to see why. So for this, now I can, of course, queue it. And what this is now going to do is it's going to export, as I mentioned, because we are in the export dialog. So this is modal. We're locked out. Now, again, we could go back and try and do something else. It's using all my resources here. I wouldn't recommend doing that. I'm just staying here for the moment because I want to show you that what it's also then going to do is it starts to upload the file. All right, and that's, of course, the speed of that is going to be based on your ISP, your service provider. So I got a lot of horsepower here. I got a lot of bandwidth. So it's already done, all right? And you can see that when it's done, it actually gives you the URL of where you'll find your content. So if you want to become a contributor today, if you're already a CC member, go to contributor.stock.adobe.com. Now, I'm not doing this as a sale. This is not a sales pitch, by the way. What am I selling? This is for you to make money. And it's free. It's free to become a contributor. And this is a great way to start leveraging a lot of that B-roll, a lot of that content that you just got laying around, and to try and make some money from it. So when it's done, it gives you the URL here. All right, now I'm not going to click away from that just yet. And by the way, something else to really emphasize. Stock video pays. Stock imagery pays too. But you got to sell a lot of images to really start making some money. One HD, full HD, 1080p stock video, your commission, now I can only give you the US dollars. I'm in US. I don't know what it is around the world. It's a, it's a conversion of this. But one HD video, your commission is 28 US dollars. All right. One image can range from 50 cents to $3 or $4 or $5, whatever. So, I mean, it's cents generally. So you got to sell a lot of images before you get to 28 bucks. Okay. So video in particular can be very, very lucrative. How does it become more lucrative? You got to get a lot up there. All right. It's a volume game. So let's do that. So now that it's been uploaded, I go to my browser here and you can see I'm in my contributor portal. If I refresh now, because we saw that it was uploaded, these are a bunch of ones that I did. Ah, lovely. There it is, okay? So there's the video that we just uploaded. You can see there's the name, Tone Arm Back to Start, okay? So Bruce is just talking about the importance of metadata. Well, there's a couple things we're going to talk about here. First and foremost, your categories. So now it's going to guess, based on the content, what category it should go into. Graphic resources, I don't know particularly why it shows that. Now there's a lot, but that makes sense because yeah, it does have kind of that graphical element and you could see people using it for that. You can override any of these things. But here's where this gets really, really cool. And this is sort of the benefits of metadata, because metadata is what's ultimately going to allow people to find your content. Now you can put, I believe, up to, it's either 30 or 50 different keywords on your videos in Adobe Stock. But we're doing something for you to kind of get you there a little bit faster via something called Adobe Sensei, which you've heard me mention here before, which is effectively machine learning. It looks at your video once you've uploaded it. It analyzes that, and then it analyzes it against other videos on Adobe Stock, and then it pre-populates the keywords for you based on your content. And what you can see, this just happened right before your eyes. Again, I didn't mock this up. It's keyworded music. All right, makes sense. If I'm looking for turntables, first I'm going to look for something in a music category. Audio, record, yes. Black, okay, because vinyl, yes. Table, fair enough. Turntable, score. Gas. No, okay. So we can delete that one, okay? White, I don't know how that necessarily applies. Food, okay, so now we're kind of getting off the, because you know what? It's probably, some of these, it sees like a rotisserie. Again, you have to start thinking, and this is something that I learned from Terry White, who's got a great series of videos on how to become stock contributors right here on the CC Facebook page. You have to think about your keywords and your metadata the way people are going to be searching on them. So again, it sees, Sensei is analyzing the spinning turntable. A rotisserie is also a turntable for food. So that's why you're seeing cooking, and I don't know what DISC, so obviously we don't need these, right? We can get rid of these. But you can enter more keywords, all right? So you might enter like LP or something like that, or you might enter 45, or you might enter whatever. You get the idea. It doesn't matter. Some other name for vinyl or turntable or record player. And then if you're going really way back, Fisher Price. Anybody who remembers the old school Fisher Price turntables and things, okay? The key here is that machine learning and Adobe Sensei are auto keywording just to get you started. Because as a contributor, I can tell you, the biggest drag and probably one of the biggest deterrents in the way that we used to contribute, so this is all new in the latest version of Premiere Pro, is doing all the keywording and descriptors. It's a pain. And if you have to come up with them without having ever done it, it's very difficult. That's the other key, is that this is keywording for you intelligently based on keywords that people search upon. So that's the key to the keywords. And again, this I learned from Terry. You have to think like someone who's searching. When I go in, for me, I'm thinking, vinyl, Beatles, blah, 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 but that's not necessarily what people are searching on, right? How are they searching? What are they looking for? I used some of these. These we did at NAB a couple months back as an example. For this video, yes, beach and ocean and water and surfing. Those are like 4 that came to mind, but this came up with so many more. Sea, landscape, coast, waves, sand, river. Just because it's the ocean doesn't mean that someone's not, doesn't mean they're not searching on river. Doesn't necessarily mean it has to be a river. You just have to think of the way people might be searching on content. Sunset, nature, winter, Europe, Iceland, coastline. Coastline would not have entered my mind initially. It's going to do that for you, and it's doing it. Oh, and it does tell you 50. Yeah, okay, so I was right. So 50 keywords max. It's going to tell you and give you good suggestions. Now, hey, is it always 100% accurate? No, not necessarily. I uploaded a bunch of stuff of my Moog synthesizers you can see here. These are kind of beauty shots. So it came up with, some that were kind of interesting. So computer, okay, sort of the complete opposite of this. It's analog synthesis. But that doesn't mean that it's not going to work in the context of some computer-based B-roll. So I thought, okay, that's pretty good. Business, okay, it's got sliders and knobs. You can see how machine learning might interpret that as business. Maybe not. Technology, good. Laptop, not so much. Keyboard, yes, that can mean many things. Audio, perfect. How does it even know audio? There's no sound. machine learning. Music, mixer, excellent. Desk, that's another name for mixer. Perfect. Button, equipment, office, mixing, and mixer. Studio, DJ. You might be thinking, it's a keyboard. I'm not a DJ. I would never use DJ. Duh. Doesn't matter. How is someone going to search on this? So I can't tell you how cool having this machine learning in Adobe Sensei is, because it jumpstarts the process for you. And then honestly, you just get going. You just keep going. Now, what's also really cool, and you saw I just did a little checkbox here, recognizable people or property. So if there are humans in your videos, very important that you have model releases. You must have model releases. They won't accept your content without model releases. Those model releases have to be uploaded to Adobe Stock. Where can you do that? Right here. Where is it going to ask you to do that? Right here. So if you have people in your video, you'd click yes, and then it goes to a dialog that says, okay, upload your model releases for all the people present in this video. Headache is gone. Really, really easy, really, really simple. And again, it takes some time for the curators to go through your content and then approve it. But once it's approved, it's out there. And the more that you upload here, the more that you do, the more that you can basically monetize. Will the metadata come into Adobe Media Encoder from stock? No. Okay, that not yet. So this is V1 of our publish to stock. That's a great question, Ken. As of right now, no. The metadata is not transferring. So you'll want to, this is because it's different metadata than the specific keyword metadata for stock. I hope we see this come in another version. Great question, though. So today, again, it's using machine learning, and then you have the option here to add additional metadata for your stock content. But as of today, it's not taking it from metadata that you may have added via XMP, okay? All right, my friends. So that's publishing to Adobe Stock. That's exporting to your favorite social networks. That's using different presets to go to Facebook and Twitter and Vimeo and Instagram, and the ability to create your own and to modify the parameters. If you want to make square, you can just type in the dimensions. If you want to change the frame rate or the frame size, if you want to do vertical for Snapchat, I showed you the same method. You can make your own export presets. You can add things like looks and LUTs, colors, image overlays, timecode, the name, branding, time tune to shrinking things down to fit a specific length. You can even add loudness normalization on export, and all of this can be done very elegantly through Adobe Media Encoder. So this has been a real pleasure having you join me over the past 6 weeks. Hope you've enjoyed the series. Lots more coming, lots more live streaming. So thank you so much for joining me again. Hope you enjoyed the series, and we will see you again next time. Thanks, everybody. Take care and have a great weekend. Bye-bye.